see if I have to click that. Am I live? Anybody? I can't tell. Is it going? There we go. Okay. Did you guys miss my little beginning thing? I hope not. I don't know. Maybe you did. But yeah, so before we go over tonight's game plan, I have magnets in my hand, so I couldn't help but play with them. We are going to I just want to talk about a couple things while people are getting settled in. One, these classes are obviously free, and I'm going to keep them free, and I plan to continue to do them. If you would like to take a one-on-one class with me, contact me. If you're part of my email group, hotpinkzebrapolish@hotmail.com, just send me an email, and you can get added to that. You'll get these email notifications about these classes. But then we will also, if you want to contact me about doing live classes, that would be the same place, or one-on-one classes, that would be the same place to do it. It's really kind of late for me. So if I talk like I don't know what I'm saying, that's why. But this is the only time I'm melody free. So that's why we're doing it in the middle of the night. But yeah, so now we can kind of go over tonight's game plan. First, we're going to kind of go over our supplies, make sure we all have what we need. And if we're missing anything, there'll be time to go and get it. See the cats in the background? They're loving that chair. After that, we'll go over each kind of product category, monomer, polymer, or powder, whatever you want to call it, brushes, and then, let's see, I've got just like some general safety stuff that I see people doing all the time in videos that I know needs to be addressed, and just some sort of basic safety stuff that if you're new to acrylic, you may not know. And if you're not new to acrylic, we all have these bad habits that we kind of need to shake sometimes for our safety and the safety of our clients. And then we're going to get to sculpt a French. And depending on how long the rest of this takes us, we may do an ombre too. So I have two nail tips ready to go if we get to doing an ombre, because I have all the stuff out anyway. So we might as well, right? Okay, so like I said, the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be gathering our supplies. And so the supply list is acrylic powder, at least 2 colors if we're going to do a French. If you want to be traditional, pink and white is always a good way to go, but who wants to be traditional? So I do have white, but then I also have a hot pink, a purple, a glitter, and then a shimmer metallic color, because each one of those is going to play a little bit differently. And it's nice just to see kind of how they all work. You're going to need monomer. If you're going to have the powder, you're going to need the monomer too. And then files, I'm going to use for the files. You see how nice and straight edged this one is? It doesn't have like that ergonomic curve, which is good for filing around the cuticles. This is a straight edged file. This is a C&D Kanga file, if anybody wants to know exactly what this guy is. This is the best kind of file for filing a smile line. You want it to be really stiff so it's not bendy at all, and super straight lines. That's going to give you the best results. So that's the kind of hand file that I have. If you do have one of the ones that's the rounded kind, it does work. It just makes it a little bit more work for you. I also have my e-file prepped and ready to go. So I love using my e-file. I have very weak hands, and so if I were to do everything with a hand file, I would probably have to find a different profession. And then the next one, you need an acrylic brush. The brush I'm using is a number 8. I usually use an 8 or a 10, but the reason I'm going to use an 8 for this particular video is, or live stream, whatever you want to call it, is because I think especially for somebody that's just learning, smaller is better. When I was in nail school, we were given the size 8, and at the time I thought, oh my goodness, this thing is tiny, it's taking me forever to sculpt anything, but it was the best thing. And I have since ventured out and I've tried bigger brushes. I have a size 16, or maybe it's even a size 20 in my set of brushes, and I think I've used it. I used it one night and I was like, ooh, I really don't like this. And then you're gonna need a nail brush, because as soon as you file that smile line, there's dust everywhere. So we need to just, hello everybody, I see all your guys' comments over there, so I just want to say hi. But you need to get rid of all that dust before you put the color on for the nail, for the tip. All right, so now just if you were missing anything, you can go ahead and grab that. Other things you may want to consider getting that I should have included that I almost forgot to bring over because I was going off of your guys' list when I was getting all my stuff ready, is you need a paper towel, because if you don't have a paper towel, you cannot wipe your brush off. And the other thing that I think is moderately important, a pair of gloves. You can use, these are nitrile gloves. Latex gloves work, provided you don't have a latex allergy. I always use nitrile because I use them on clients too, and if you have a client with a latex allergy, then you can't use your gloves. And so nitrile are just a safer way to go for everybody. And let me see, is there anything else that you might need that I have over here? I have a face mask on for when I'm filing for dust, and I have, this is funny, this is my Dap and Dish. It's an old Gerber baby food jar. Funny thing, when I put the monomer in here, the little sealer like fizzed and it foamed and I peeled it out. So this doesn't screw on anymore, it just sets on there. But it works really well because it's a glass jar. And so that is the whole list, and then the nail tips, obviously, for sculpting on and for practicing with. And if you have them on a practice hand, fantastic. If you have them on little nail stands like this, that works. Otherwise, you can always use your own hand too, if you want to. So that is the whole list. I hope everybody's got what they need. So now we're gonna go over our safety precautions because that is one of the most important things that you can do. And so the first one is keep monomer and polymer off your skin. It's not just monomer that you have to keep off your skin. It's both. It's the powder, it's the liquid, it's the whole shebang. It's primers and the acid-free primers or acid primers and the dehydrators, all that stuff, all those nail chemicals, you want to keep them off of your skin. Gel polish too. Gel is a huge problem because you can develop an allergy really quickly and it happens like that. And so if you aren't being very cautious with keeping this stuff off of your skin, it's just a recipe for disaster. So you can wear a pair of gloves or you can just be meticulous. It's up to you. If you're going to be meticulous, then just be very careful because it's hard to keep it, especially monomer. If you felt it, I mean, I felt it. I think everybody that's done nails has felt it. It's got like an oily texture to it and it's just hard to fully get off of your skin. So the next thing is whether you are wearing gloves or not, you need to wash your hands when you're done. And there's all these, I work at night. This is my usual time to work. And so all the time my husband will come up and he'll go, do you want to eat something? Can I bring you something to eat? Do you want some of this? And I'll be like, I can't. I'm like, my hands are all chemically. Or he'll try to hand me something. He'll be like, no, I can't touch it. My hands, covered in nail glue. So that's just something to keep in mind. The next thing, this is something that doesn't bug me so much in videos because you don't see it, but this is something that when I was working in a salon, I saw all the time where nail techs would eat at their table, they would drink at their table. I even saw people like set a sandwich down on their table that they hadn't cleaned yet. That's not good. So in the spirit of trying to keep hydrated, I have my shelf behind me, so I always keep my mug, my huge mug of tea, behind me or somewhere just at least off to the side to try to keep stuff away from it. And if you are going to be filing, definitely either keep a lid on what you're doing or keep it really far away, like I'm saying, feet away from you, so that you don't get any filing dust or anything in here because you don't want to consume that. That's no good at all. But I do also, I'm pro hydration, so I keep it close by enough. So that's my piece on general safety. So now when we're going over monomers specifically, my first recommendation is to choose a decent brand because you can get brands, like Warm Pretty Store sells monomer or Banggood or Amazon, eBay. You can get monomer all over the place. I wouldn't do it. I would even be leery over some of the brands that they have at, say, Sally's Beauty Supply because I've used some of them and they're not good. And that's just unfortunate, especially if you're starting out and you try a monomer that isn't good and then you just have a bad experience with it. It can give you this kind of discouraging feeling towards using acrylic in general because your monomer was a bad one. And I know, I'm trying to think of what the brand was that I used that I got from Sally's because I was in a pinch and I needed it. And it clogged my brush up right away and I had to actually get a new brush. And that made me mad because brushes aren't cheap. So the brand I'm using tonight is Ugly Ducklings monomer, but I really like Koopa's monomer and I also really like Young Nails monomer of the ones that I have tried. But we're going to use the Ugly Duckling one for starters. I love the bottle, so that's, a bonus for me. And then the next thing we're going to go with is keep it clean and clear, just like the face products that you shouldn't be using. So by that, I mean in your Dap and Dish, as you can see, mine is wiped spotless. As soon as it runs out, I scrub the thing out because if there's any little bits of powder that get in here, then it'll get in your brush and it'll be already polymerized polymer so that it'll clog your brush, it'll make your brush sticky, it'll ruin your application, it'll just mess up the whole thing. And if it's not visually clean and clear, it's not usable. And if you're using a super dark color like say black or a red that's really dark, or even dark purples, or blue. Blue's one that definitely will tint your monomer, then it's going to affect the rest of your colors. So if you try to go like straight from dark blue to white, you're going to end up with a really swirly looking light blue. So keep your monomer clean. Don't overfill your jar so that you're ruining a whole bunch of monomer if you do happen to have a mishap. And you can, just clean it out periodically. Use a high quality paper towel. That's the next thing on my little agenda, because if you use one that's really, really cheap and has no texture to it, when you're wiping the monomer off your brush, you're not going to get the little powder residual out of your brush. And you really need to keep your brush clean, which is kind of part tips on your brush and part tips on monomer. But just make sure that your paper towel is at least, decent. And then last but not least, make sure you're using EMA. So that's ethyl methacrylate. And on your bottle of, this one came in a box, but on the bottom of it, it does say that it is ethyl methacrylate. I'm not going to go into the whole methyl methacrylate, ethyl methacrylate fiasco right now, because that's a conversation that we could be here for a long time with. But when you're looking at them, just make sure it says EMA. And if you're going from a reliable source, like, a wide stream brand, then you should be fine with that. But I would not purchase monomer from a sketchy website. Not that Born Pretty Store is sketchy, but don't do it. Or Banggood or any of those. It's just a bad. Are the blue shop towels okay? I've never used blue shop towels. Are they disposable, or are they, if they're disposable ones, then quite possibly. If they're reusable, you don't want to reuse the towel, because once the acrylic little bits get in there, then it's going to, it's trash. But if they're disposable, I would think they probably are. Just try to feel, if it feels like it's getting your brush clean when you're all done and you're wiping it out. Young Nails is EMA. Anything that is regulated by the United States FDA is going to be EMA, because MMA is illegal in the US. That being said, at least 50% of nail shops in the US still use MMA because it's cheap and, super hazardous. So that's always fun. But yeah, so just make sure your stuff is all safe. Next up on the list, powder. Your powders or your polymers, that is two names for the same thing. The first thing I want to mention is that different brands react differently. So when you see me going over my liquid and powder ratio and how much I dip my brush, just know that it might not be the same for your stuff, because your monomer is going to react differently with your polymers. And unless you're using the exact same brands that I am, which the chances are slim to none, then it's going to be a little different. And I'm going to actually show that to you, because I've got this Coupa. It's the Artfinity Triptych, and it's the color Butternut. And then I have this one from Double Dip that's Deep Rose, which is one of my absolute favorites. And I'll show you both of them with the monomer so that you can see how vastly different. And it's very awkward when you're going and you're switching back and forth, especially like within a single, so if they feel like a cloth, then those should be fine. Sorry, I'm reading the comments and going back and forth. But you'll just see how different they are. And if you're doing a single nail and you're using multiple brands and multiple colors like I typically do, then you have to focus really hard to regulate how much monomer you're using. And some brands, the difference is a lot more significant than others, but especially the Coupa one uses so much monomer. And so you gotta have your brush soaking. And so what's the best, I'm going to go to a comment really quick. What's the best acrylic brush that I would recommend? Because mine keeps getting hard and I'm doing everything right as far as cleaning, but it just keeps falling apart. You probably need a new brush just to start out with, because once they kind of go down that pathway, it's a hard thing to come back from. My favorite brushes all time are the Coupa Divinity Sculptors. I have 3/8 and a 10, or 4/8 and a 10. I have a bunch of these and I use them constantly. They come with a cover, but we'll get more into that in just a moment. But these ones are the way to go. Then my magnets that you guys probably saw me playing with earlier. I wanted to show you these. So I have the thing on the side that says more pigment equals weaker acrylic. And I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, that if you have a super pigmented acrylic, that you should use some clear with it so that it stays strong. This is a visual explanation of why. So see these two magnets? I can barely pull them apart. Oops, go this way. Barely pull them apart because they're super strong. Okay, I have a little bit of pigment here. It's my little pigment paper. Put this together. Still really strong. These are attached. These are the little powder polymers, and when they're attaching themselves together, it's very much like how these two magnets are attaching. They're really strong as long as nothing is getting between them. But then, say you have a lot of pigment and some glitter between these, then you can see that they're not going to be as strong. These come apart really easy. They still stuck together. They still held on. You know, they're still there. But as soon as all that gets between them, they're super weak. And that's kind of just the idea behind that whole thing. And it is true. There are some brands that say you don't need to cap with clear because they don't need it. My personal feeling is better to be safe than sorry. And then same thing, be smart where you shop, kind of like with the acrylic monomer. Just keep in mind where you're getting stuff from, because things that aren't regulated by the United States, that aren't, from here, I guess, or from someplace that's a little bit more reliable, like UK companies, Australian companies, Canadian companies, but I would say China or, Korea, or just some places that don't regulate their cosmetic industry quite as closely, are too dangerous to use their polymers from, just like their monomer. So both these companies are US based. They're pretty good. Just another thing to keep in mind. All right, so now brushes. I already kind of went over the start small thing because it's easier to work with a small brush than it is a big one. Covered is better. I love it when my acrylic brush comes with a built-in cap. That is the best thing, because otherwise your bristles get all messed up, and as soon as you put them in here, there's little things that kind of guide the bristles back to where they're supposed to go. So if you find one that has a cover on it, that always just keeps them better so much longer. And then you get what you pay for. So if you buy a brush from, what's the company? It'll come to me in like 10 minutes. But if you buy a brush from a company that sells them and they're pretty cheap, then am I using odorless monomer? No, I'm not. I can go over that in just a second. I'll go back to monomers after I get done with this, and I'll go over odorless versus non-odorless monomer. But this one, so the cover is nice, and you get what you pay for. So the more you pay for brushes, the higher quality the Kolinsky bristles are, and they'll repel the polymer from getting stuck in there easier, keeping your brush nicer longer, and long road, you're paying less because you don't have to replace your brush anywhere near as often. And so then clean before your first use. This is one that some people don't know. When you first buy a brush, it has a cornstarch mixture on the bristles. That's why it looks so nice and pretty and perfect. And if you don't clean it out, as soon as you dip that cornstarch mixture into your monomer, it'll clump your bristles all together and it'll ruin the brush before you even do anything with it. So then the first time you use it, do this is not a new brush, but you flick the bristles just a little bit, and you can do it with I would use a glove or something, because you don't necessarily want to touch the bristles of your brush with your fingers and get the oils on them, but you just have to kind of work the powder out of the bristle, and it'll poof up like a cloud of smoke. And then as soon as it's done with that, then you can use it. But before you go, all excited to use your new brush, just make sure you get it nice and clean. So now really quick to go back to odorless versus non-odorless or stinky monomer. I don't have a preference. I use whatever I find that I think works the best. And the difference between, an odorless monomer cures slower, because as the acrylic is curing, it's not drying, it's curing, but as it's curing, the monomer gets emitted from the nail and goes up into the universe. Isn't that pleasant? And so the less odor it is, it's not that that it's smelling less, it's smelling longer. And so it doesn't seem as harsh because it's just taking longer for it to happen. And so I don't necessarily use odorless monomer because I want my acrylic to set up pretty snappy. So if you are somebody that wants more work time with your acrylic, try an odorless one, because it'll give you some more time to play around with it before it sets up on you. But if you want to be fast with it, you're going to want a monomer that is not odorless, because it's just going to speed up your process. So that's why I don't worry about it. If I happen to use one that's odorless, that's fine. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at the workspace. So I'm going to first I'm going to slip on my gloves because, we talked about that. We're going to put these on. And then I'm going to periodically check back on the comments, but it's not as easy to just be glancing at them while I'm doing this over here. So we'll get the gloves on and we'll start looking at some different stuff with the colors. So first I'm going to show you guys how I put the monomer into my dappen dish. I know some people probably are going to be bored by this trick. I'll zoom this out. Ooh, wrong way. There we go. Because you may or may not know this. I know some people use an eyedropper to get the monomer out of the bottle, which is a perfectly acceptable way. When I was in nail school, I did that for about 2 weeks before I learned this trick, and then I have never used that eyedropper since. So you hold your acrylic brush over your jar, so it's about in the middle. And it works in a dappen dish. You just make sure you're over it a little closer, and then you press the bristles up to the side of the jar, and you pour, and it'll go right in. We're going to put about that much in there. All right. And then I'm just going to tap my brush off. So I'm going to open up my different colors to show you guys. So like I said, this is the first one. This is a double dip. And then I've got a Koopa. These are both not glittery or metallic in any way. They're just nice, bright, creamy colors. And then I have a glitter from Double Dip. This one is, well, I can put the names in the description box later. And then this is Koopa Artfinity, and this is a metallic color, which I would have to say Koopa's metallics are pretty amazing because they're gorgeous. All right, so we got all these lined up here. And so we're gonna go over and I'm gonna start and go down the line. So like I said before, the double dips doesn't need nearly as much monomer. So as we tap into the monomer, you're gonna see that that has a really nice, smooth bead. Really nice smooth bead. It's polymerizing well. It's got that nice kind of creamy look to it. Put that down before it cures on my brush. But that's going to give you a really nice creamy texture with, not that much monomer. But now we're going to go into the Koopa one and you're going to see a different whole situation. Same amount of monomer. I'm going to go in here. And that's a much smaller amount of acrylic. If I put it down next to it, I set it down faster, so it's hard to tell. But it's not nearly as much product. So when you're grabbing a bead from, brand A, you just have to know how much monomer you need for a certain size. When you're grabbing a bead from brand B, you have to adjust your ratios. And that's something that can be very frustrating. Now, if we look at a bead of a very glittery acrylic, that's a different way of looking at it because it doesn't ever get that creaminess to it. But there's that one. And then we'll grab this metallic one. Isn't that pretty? I love that color. So now that you're looking at all of these, you may notice that, your products are working differently than mine. That's perfectly normal. Your temperature in your house may affect your products. If your room temperature is hotter, your products are going to set faster. If your room temperature is really cold, your products are going to set really slow. I live in Wisconsin and it is the middle of winter for us, and our house is pretty warm, but there are times when I can tell that my products are taking forever to cure because of our lovely weather here. So when you're looking at how much monomer you want, my favorite thing to do is I completely saturate my brush and then I take out what I don't want. So if I want just a tiny bead, I'll saturate my brush and then I'll tap it on the side probably 3-4 times, and then I'll be able to grab just a little bit. See, tiny bead. If you want a really big bead, I'll saturate it and tap it once really quick. And then I'll get a nice big bead. And you can do all of this with the same brush. So you don't need to have a bunch of different brushes. You just need to play around with your monomer. And then as far as the tapping into the powders go, sometimes I like to do that. I like to flatten them out so that they don't have that little indent mark in them anymore. When you're grabbing your powder, after you got your monomer, don't dip your brush in straight down, and don't dip it in completely flat. You want it a 45-degree angle to the powder. That's going to give you the best acrylic placement on the bristles, because as you can see, the acrylic extends beyond the tip of the brush, but it doesn't go up and around the bristle, so it doesn't go 360 around the tip. And that bead is so, so perfect. And the texture you're looking for acrylic is you don't want it to be runny, because see, it's not dripping off my brush. It's just sitting on the bristles. It isn't powdery looking anywhere. It's just creamy and smooth. Get rid of that again before it cures there. But that is the exact texture you want your acrylic to be. That'll give you amazing workability. As you can see, even sitting here, it's just a nice, round, smooth bit of acrylic. So there's one other thing that sometimes acrylic will do. I'm going to grab a color that I know does this. Okay, this one is from Coupa, and this is called After Party. If you're going to avoid a specific color, this one might be the best color to avoid that I own. It does a color bleed. And if you guys have never experienced a color bleed, this might be an interesting thing. But if you have, this might, blow your mind. So we're gonna grab our bead, and then as you're applying this color on a nail, which I'm just gonna grab one of my tips. Probably it's not gonna do it for me now because I'm showing you. It didn't. That turkey. Oh, it is a little bit. You might not be able to see it on camera though. The center of the acrylic is a different color. There we go. The center of the acrylic is a different color than it is around the outside. So it's not a uniform, smooth color of acrylic. It's just kind of a blended out mess. And when that happens, and that usually happens with brighter, darker colors, so like this pink one or purple one that's not pastel, but it's actually, some of my pastels do this too. But when that happens, the best thing to do is to take, and after you grab your bead of acrylic, flip your brush over on your towel, and you see all that little burst of color that came out of it? And then you'll get that extra liquid out of the bead of acrylic, which will prevent that color from going all over the place. And the other thing that does that helps with is if you're trying to make something that's really stiff, like if you're sculpting something and you want to have a lot of height, you don't want to spread out at all, if you take the liquid out of the back of your brush, then that will kind of pull some of the moisture out of the bead of acrylic after it's gotten that smooth texture, and it'll apply in a thicker, rounder capacity. So if you're trying to make, I'm trying to think of a good example. So when I did the spaghetti and meatballs nail earlier this month, and to make those little meatballs, it's really good to take the liquid out of the back of your brush because you're trying to make a sphere. So trying to get the different shapes down has a lot to do with what your brush is, or not your brush, what your monomer is doing. So we've got our monomer here, and there's one other thing. So I showed you guys how to make the different size acrylic beads, but the other thing I want to just go over is making sure that your beads are consistent. So we're going to always keep track of how we're dipping our brush. And that's not the easiest thing to do, because as you're dipping your brush in and you're working fast, and say you're working on a client and you're just going, keeping track of what you're doing isn't easy. So having a ritual in place so that you always do the same thing no matter what, like I said, always saturating my brush and then tapping off the excess. When you want a bunch of the exact same size of something, then if you keep track of how you're doing it, then you can do that. So if you just always saturate, and then you know, okay, for these pieces I'm doing, I'm going to tap 3 times on the side before I go get my powder. And every time you do the same exact thing, like if you're making 2 halves of a bow and you want the 2 sides to be the same size, then if you do that and you go, okay, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm doing it, and you follow through with that, then you don't have to worry about your stuff being all sorts of different sizes. So that's my keys for that, and we've got all of this lovely mess here. But now we're going to actually do some sculpting. So I'm going to move this stuff off to the side. Got all these open. Is anybody else super paranoid about closing stuff up because you spill things all the time? Because I'm sitting here, I've got all those powders open, and I'm thinking, oh no, I'm bound to spill something. So move this stuff off to the side. Grab the nail I didn't just mess around with. Okay, so the color I'm going to be using to sculpt my nail bed is one of my favorite nail bed colors that I have ever used, and it is the Coupa Divinity Nail System, and it's called Cover. That's the only thing it's called, but This is one of the best powders I've ever used. Okay, so I'm going to check the comments here, and it says, does one ball, two, or three really matter for the final product? Absolutely not. Whatever works for you is what you should do. So if I wouldn't even say I do that. I do whatever seems right, and it sometimes depends on the color I'm using and how thin I want it. So if you're trying to do something in a single ball because you just feel like that's quicker and it causes you more work later because it causes more filing, then it doesn't save you any time. And some people get very, I don't know, I've seen some kind of shady comments on Instagram about people that don't do a one ball method and saying that they're wasting so much time and wasting so much product. And you're not wasting any product if you're laying down less product in smaller amounts than, you know, if you're trying to do it all in one and you have this huge hot mess going on. But that's my opinion. Some people have very strong opinions about 1, 2, or 3 method. But yeah, I was taught with the 3-ball method when I was in nail school, and the whole time I was thinking, oh, this will be so much better once I get out of here and they let me, and I can just do a 1-ball method at my own speed, and I go back and forth. So to start our nail bed, we've got our color here, and every once in a while, something you might want to do with your polymers, especially if you grab a color that you rarely use, is to give them a quick stir with, obviously not your acrylic brush, but with a little whisk or a little spoon. I have one in my cabinet next to me so that I can kind of redisperse it and make sure that everything is smooth and even. Now we're going to grab our acrylic. So we're going to dip our brush as we have, tap it off a couple times, and then get our brush in. I like to tap my brush into my acrylic. Some people I know like to pull it through, but tapping is what I think works better. And then we're going to set the bead down about where we want the tip of our smile line to be. So right about there. And like I said before, in not this video, but in some of the stuff I talked when I was talking about this, doing this live stream, is that sculpting a French is, if you can get this down, you can sculpt anything. And that is what I believe, because if you can get nice, crisp, beautiful smile lines, then sky's the limit. So we're going to pull these up. So after you have them, just sort of push the acrylic up towards the apex and then tuck in the smile line as you go. Clean off your brush with monomer when you need to. You guys can see me wiping constantly. That sounds wrong. Wiping constantly? Yeah. Just tuck in your smile line as needed, especially right at the tip of the point of the smile line. And then pull it in. Don't worry about how thick it is. You see the thickness of my product. It's pretty thick on the sides, and it's a little bit thinner in the middle, but we'll fix that in a moment. So just kind of tap that out a little bit. Try to make sure that your smile line is close to what you want it to be. It does not have to be perfect, because like I said, we have a file to file it. And that's another thing I want to stress, is that if you have to do more filing because your work isn't flawlessly sculpted from the beginning, that's fine. There's no issues, because you can always go through and file things as much as needed. So we're just going to get our smile line as neat as we can, play around with it until it is set up. Is kind of what I like to do, is just keep smoothing it out until I can't do anything with it anymore, which we're about at that point. So I'm going to grab a second bead. Because I have a pretty long nail bed on this nail, since it is fairly long, I'm going to do this probably in two more beads to fill in this nail bed. So the next one I'm going to grab is going to be bigger than the first one I did. Not by a lot, pretty similarly sized. And I'm going to set this down, and you guys can probably tell that it is too dry. Just a little bit. It is going to polymerize as it sits there. But I laid that one down a little bit more on the dry side because I want it to be able to build up some more height on my smile line. And if it was too thin, it wasn't going to hold its shape for that. So we're going to pull that forward and then pat this down, and then finish the little tails of our smile line. Clean the brush again, tuck that side in, pull it down, flatten it out, just like so. There, looks pretty good. And now you can see I have some more height on that. And it's not perfectly even from side to side, but that doesn't matter. Especially for a smile line and a French, you actually want to have it be kind of a little bit thick and clunky. And if you're doing this on a client and they're, you know, everybody have those clients that nitpick every single step of the things that you do. Or as soon as you do something, they like pull their hand away from you and stare at every single nail. They're definitely going to look at this because they're going to think that it's way too thick and it'll never get thin enough. And you'll probably have to explain to them what you're doing, even if you've done it before. So then after you have this next one, we're going to grab another bead of acrylic, this time smaller and thinner, and place it right at the cuticle area or the proximal fold if you want to be perfectly technical, which more and more I'm trying to be perfectly technical. Pat that in right around the cuticle area and then brush it down. So this is going to need to set up for a couple of minutes as that acrylic cures because we can't file it until this is all cured. Tuck the little tails in again on the sides. Make sure that, you know, you want to try to minimize your filing. I don't think anybody wants it to be super thick. So while this is setting for a moment, I'm going to answer another question that popped through. And it is that how thick I would make it for a press-on? Nope, I would never do acrylic for a press-on. The reason is a press-on tip. Let me grab, since if we're gonna do a ombre, I need to have another tip since I just messed up, or I applied acrylic to one already. So I can show you guys. You've got your press-on tip. Ooh, that was loud. Can you see? You see how this one isn't as flexible as the ones I typically use for actual press-on sets, but it's flexible. I can bend it. It'll move, and it's really thin right back there, right where it's going to sit, you know, on the nail. It's very thin. It's very flexible, and it's going to bend onto the natural nail. So when you're doing that in a press-on, you want to keep that flexibility. So as soon as you apply acrylic to it, it loses the flexibility and it cannot bend anymore. And that really makes it so that they don't fit very well. So when you're doing a press-on set, I wouldn't do anything that is hard in the way of like acrylic or hard gel or builder gel or polygel. Polygel, because you don't want it to lose its flexibility. So gel polish is, unless I'm doing something dimensional, is the only thing I'll put on a press-on. That's kind of my game plan with those. Now we got a couple more questions. When I'm doing 3D or 4D, is building the height better to drain the bead or start off with a drier bead? It kind of depends on the product I'm using. If I want it to be, if it's a bright color, like one of those purples or a pink, it's better to drain the bead so that you don't minimize your pigment. If it's something like this cover pink, where I know that the color is going to be pretty consistent no matter what I do, because it's a reliable product that I'm used to using and I know exactly how it's going to behave, then you can go either way and it doesn't really make any difference. For 3D or 4D, I typically will drain the back of the bead just to keep that color. And then, is it okay to do 3D or 4D on a tip? It is. It is okay to do that because when you're, as long as if it's the whole nail, then hopefully you're with a client that you can size it to, and you don't have to worry about, you know, having it fit. And even if you can make sure just that the fit of the nail is right, and if you find that a size up, like if say their nail is a size 7, but you find that the curvature of their nail fits a size 8 really well, or wait, no, I did that backwards, a size 6 really well because their nail doesn't have as deep of a natural C curve, then you can file the edges of the 6 down to fit their nail and fit their C curve before applying the 3D, 4D acrylic on top of it. And then it matches the C curve and the width of the nail. But if you're doing things from afar, doing too much 3D on top of a press-on is not recommended. In fact, I've turned down some press-on requests because of that, or just made different suggestions. Like I recently did a bunch of press-on or I did a bunch of 4D pieces for somebody and mailed them to them so they could attach it to the nail themselves so that they knew it would fit instead of doing it as a press-on. So that's my recommendations. But you guys know in all my videos I do my 4D stuff on tips like this. But that's only temporary. I never actually wear them for very long at all. So now this one is nice and is cured. Can you guys hear that? All the way, the whole thing. And we're going to move more stuff out of my way so I don't tip it over. Oh geez, I never even closed my monomer. That would be such a mess. I spilled monomer on my lovely painted table once and it eroded the paint and made my paint peel off. You don't even know how mad I was at my own clumsiness. So we're going to file this smile line. Like I said, a straight file is best to do this. Really quick, I need to take a drink though because my throat is like, why are you talking so much? All right, we'll see if that helps. Maybe, maybe not. We're going to file this and we're going to keep it perpendicular to the nail. I remember Kirsty Meakin once saying that Americans like to say the word perpendicular a lot. And every time I say it in regards to nails, I think of that comment that she made. And it kind of cracks me up a little bit because I do say perpendicular. And I don't know if it's really all Americans or if maybe she watched one of my videos and just assumed that I was like the rest of us. I don't know. But you want to keep the nail file, you know, straight up and down. Can you guys see that angle? Very straight to the nail so that you get the sharpest lines possible because that's going to, okay, I'm moving all my monomer out of the way because I'm going to tip over my dappen dish too. I'm really the klutziest person I know. I'll drop anything, like the drop of a hat. So we're going to file this. And if you're doing it on a little nail thing like I do, a lot of times I'll hold it down with my hand. I'll even do this on the client, is I'll put my thumb on top of their nail just to give the whole system some stability. Because have you guys ever been to somebody that's filing your nail and you can feel your nail moving back and forth, your natural nail moving back and forth? It's not such an uncomfortable feeling. So if you just hold that nail steady, it gives a lot more comfortable of an experience for the client too. And for you because you don't have to be thinking about it. So we're just going to file this nice and straight. Make sure that those lines are as crisp and clean as possible. So do one side and then we'll look at it. I'm just going to flip this over. Again, I'm not working on an actual human, so I have the luxury of being able to just turn this around and make it easier on myself. Make sure that we file all the way up to the very corners. And if you are working on a client, be careful when you're filing these upper corners because you don't want to cut in to the nail wall or the nail wall on the side because those cuts hurt. It's like a terrible paper cut if you've ever had one. I do it to myself all the time because I'm not very careful when I'm filing my own nails. I'm just going to file these up like that. And then when you're done and you think you're done filing it, look at the nail because make sure that it is centered on whatever it is that is holding it, including the client's finger. And then just look at it and make sure that it is centered from side to side. Because to me, I thought this was looking pretty good. And now I have it centered and I can see that this side is definitely coming down farther than this side. So it needs more. But until you have that nail completely straight on what's holding it, you cannot tell because it's a little crooked and you think it looks straight, but it's not, and it causes some problems. So we're just going to file it some more. Make sure everything looks perfecto. Look at it again. Yeah, still needs a little bit more. And you don't have to be as much of a perfectionist as I am, but for the sake of, you know, my good name, we're going to keep it looking pretty sharp. All right, look at this again. That's pretty good. And then we're going to file the very center of it. When you're doing and trying to decide the shape of your nail bed, look at the shape of the nail that you're working on. So what I have here is I have a coffin tip. So I want to have an almond shaped nail bed. And if you have an almond that you're working on, an almond shaped, then you want it to have a little bit, not quite a stiletto. You don't want it to be that, you know, total point, but you want it to be more narrow than the tip of your nail is. So if you have a wide square nail, then you can have a round smile line. But like on this nail, a round smile line would look just not quite right. It would, you might not even be able to tell why it looks not quite right, but you would just know that it looks a little strange. So for that purpose, we're going to do, you just want to keep it a little bit more tapered than the tip of the nail. So that looks pretty good from all sides. If you look at it from the side view, you can see that we have nice tall walls on our tip. And I'm actually going to take and do just a little bit more perfecting here. And then after that, we get to decide on a color. So let's see. Should we do a purple? I'm all about purple. Or should we go with white and be traditional? Let's go with white and be traditional. Why not? We only live once. So this is the white I'm going to use. Coupa Divinity Structure Advanced Acrylic Polymer. And the reason I'm using this, well, for one thing, I have a huge jar of it, but this is the best white I've ever used too. And besides their Triptych powders from Coupa, I absolutely love all of Coupa's products. The Triptychs, I'm kind of, I've had better. So we're going to fill in this tip with our white. And I'm going to, my monomer's not dirty, that's the towel underneath it. In case anybody was looking at that. I'm going to grab a bead of this. We're going to place it down right in the very center of the nail. And then we're going to push it up. And this is a case where you want your powder to be a little bit thinner, or your acrylic, your bead of acrylic to be a little thinner, because it's going to sort of set in to that smile line so much better. And if it isn't thin enough where it kind of morphs to the smile line, you might end up with little bubbles there. And then when you go to file it, your smile line will have these little, like, maybe a scallop looking edge, because it won't be that really crisp, clean look. At this particular point, your smile line may not be perfect, because if it's perfect at the base of the nail, that's what you need. You don't need it to be perfect at the top. We're not worried about the top. Well, everybody's saying purple. Oh well, we went with white. There's always next time. When we do the ombre, it'll be purple. And so we're going to grab a little bit more acrylic. We're going to pull it up the sides. And as you can see, can you guys see how it's sort of just collapsing into that smile line without doing hardly any work, because the acrylic is on the wet side. The wet side of town. All right, brush that down. Pull it around. And you can, even if you want to, you can set acrylic right on top of this. We'll do that on the other side. You can see what that does. You can set a whole bunch of acrylic right over the top of the nail bed, and that's fine. Brush that down and over. There. Looks like a mess at the moment. This is not a case where that nosy client is going to be like, what are you doing? Are you qualified? Yeah. Especially people, if this is the first time you've ever done nails on them and they don't trust you, then it's always a fun experience. We're going to add just a little bit more to the tip of our nail. Like so. Brush it up. That being said, there's a lot of people that are doing nails that don't really know what they're doing. So I guess if I would definitely be that nosy client myself. I would criticize each and every step somebody did, and probably have some notes, if I'm being totally honest. For that matter, I don't think I'd let anybody else touch my nails. All right, so we got a nice, well sculpted nail here, and we're going to let this cure. So we're going to set it off to the side, and we're going to do that ombre that I mentioned, because that sounds like fun. So we're going to pop off this one, get my poster putty out from underneath it. All right, so I'm going to ask, purple with pink ombre, purple with silver, or purple with glitter? And while you guys are thinking that and pondering that, I'm going to answer some more questions. So I saw one up above. I'm going to scroll back. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. What are my thoughts on crystal nail files? Are you talking about the glass nail files or the brand Crystal Nails? If you're talking glass nail files, I have one right next to me actually. This kind. Is this what you're talking about? Mine has an anchor on it that I painted. But if this is what you're talking about, I love these things for natural nails because they are very nice and they don't split the nail layers apart. They're more gentle. The thing I don't think that there's not a glass file out there that I think works with acrylics because they're not coarse enough. The grit is way too fine to work with that. So then, yeah, so I love them for natural nails, which I rarely ever get to do anything with. And so then we have, how do I deal with clients like that in a professional way? It depends on who it is. And it depends on if it's a client that I've seen, I have clients that I've had for, years. And if it's a client like that I've had for years, usually, and they're picking at their nails, I'll be like, I'm not done yet because we've kind of, grown with a friendship. If it's somebody I've just met, usually especially if I'm just laying down a product and if they are just looking at their nails really closely, I'll say, just so you know, I'm not done yet. Please don't judge the final product until we're done because you don't know how it's going to keep going. And I try to have a very gentle conversation with them. Usually when I first meet a client, I try not to say much of anything besides asking them questions. That's my typical go-to. I try to ask them questions that determine exactly what they're looking for in their nail set. And then once we have that nailed down, I ask polite little questions, do you like the winter? Do you live with any animals? Do you like cats? Just, things to try to keep the conversation going. So now we got both purple with pink and purple with glitter. So let's look at this. We've got, you know what? We'll just do everything. Why not? So we've got, I'm going to go silver into the purple into pink. Does that sound gorgeous to everybody? I think so. Yeah. So we're going to start out with the bottom, the color that's at the tip. And then we're going to brush that up. And then we're going to do the purple in the middle, brush that down and brush it up. And then we're going to do the silver at the cuticle. When you're doing ombres, this is where the texture of the product really makes a difference, like the metallic versus a glitter versus these smooth colors, because the smoother the color is, the easier it's going to ombre. And it also makes a difference on how much liquid. Whenever you're doing an ombre, you want your acrylic more liquidy. You want it to be wetter. And so when you're dipping in to the powder to get your acrylic wetter, don't let your brush sit in there very long. Get it loaded up with your monomer and then dip it quicker so that you can do it faster. So I'm just going to really quickly I'm just going to accept a comment that was held for review. And I don't know why it was held for review. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got make sure I'm centered on my thing. All right, so we're going to grab our bead of pink. Like I said, pretty wet. We're going to place it down. And I'm going to remove some of the extra that was about to drip off the end. Very quickly, get it to where it's supposed to go. Flip my brush over, and then I'm going to brush it up. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the great thing with ombres, is that you can keep going back and forth and fix them. So we've got that going on, and that's pretty good. It's pretty smooth. It's not obviously perfect, but the fact that it's going onto a clear plastic tip that's really shiny does, affect how that is going to go. So now I'm going to take a very small bead of the purple. I'm going to place it above where the pink ends, just a little bit above that, and then brush that down. And just start that blend. I do ombres in a gazillion stages. I don't ever do them try to do just one bead of pink and one bead of purple and one bead of silver. I like to take my time. And that's one thing about me that I guess I do differently than a lot of people. You see, there's so many people and shops that try to advertise how quickly they can get people in and out. And even when I was working in a salon that it was what I call a chop shop, then they were like, it took you 42 minutes to do a gel manicure. It's like, yes, it did. And you have a problem with this? Because I'm meticulous, and I think, a selling point for myself, as long as you find the right clients who, you know, want to have their nails look like they were done by somebody who's meticulous. So we got our first start to the process. It's not perfect, as you can see. It's got a little bit of a gap in the middle where the colors aren't totally blending. So we're going to grab some more of our pink and go back over this area. I did not choose the easiest products to ombre either. We're going to blend those. These Koopa ones don't ombre as well as some. That looks a lot better. Wipe off the brush again, and I'll probably go over that particular spot a third time or a fifth time in a moment just to make sure that it is good. Now we're going to go back over in the cuticle area, and this is a wet bead, and I'm not even going to blend it up. I'm just going to kind of, just sort of smooth that out a little bit so that there's not such a bump there. Maybe just a little bit more. Like I said, I'm slow. Bear with me. That's why I speed my videos up so much, because you guys would be watching me do nails for ages. All right, there we go. That looks nice. Then we're going to let that cure, and while that's curing, I'm going to take a little bit more purple and put it down over here. Blend that again really fast. That's the one thing about doing ombres, is that you do have to work with the acrylic immediately and not let it wait on you, because as soon as you do that, it's going to not blend out fast. And just to make sure that your acrylic is very wet, that's the main keys with this. So now that we're pretty much done with the purple and the pink, we're going to bring our silver glitter into the mix. Grab a little bit more, and then go right along the top of right along the cuticle area, and then bring that down. So with a glitter, you can't just wipe over the entire nail. If that was a third color, I would have just wiped my brush all the way down the nail to kind of blend over the entire thing. But because that's a glitter, it'll create a fog over the whole nail if you do that. So just you can even tap out a glitter one a little bit like this. Instead of trying to do brush strokes, you can do more of tapping, and that'll kind of blend it out some. So once we have that nice blend, this is something that I always do, and I've seen a couple people that say that you don't need to encapsulate a ombre. My personal feelings are that you absolutely need to encapsulate an ombre, because if you don't, then, I mean, if you look at this from the profile, there's definitely a bulk of product right there, and then dips and that comes up. That's not a nail that is safe for anybody to wear. And then if you look at it from this way, you can see it's really thin and it's lopsided. So nobody wants to wear that. We're going to encapsulate this. And if you were to file this and try to just keep it as it is, then it's not going to work. So here we go. We also have my clear, if this surprises anybody, Koopa structure. I have tried all sorts of different brands of clear. Koopa's, again, by far my favorite. And then we're going to grab our bead. And I'm going to do this in at least two. I'll decide when I get there. Place that right about the center of the length of the nail. Pat it from side to side while it's still kind of polymerizing and setting up a little bit. So I can then just walk it down the nail. Just like that. Okay, so once we have that walked, I always call it walking it down the nail when I bring it down. And we're going to, so you can see that filled in that dip on there. So now the next bead isn't necessarily to build up much of this area, just a little bit to build up that apex, but really to smooth this out and protect that silver glitter is what the next, I mean, you want to have clear acrylic over the whole thing, but it doesn't need to be as much. So we're going to do this in one more bead, place that down, wipe your brush. So as soon as I lay down my bead, I always go back and I wipe my brush off and I let the bead of acrylic sit on the nail for a moment, and that gives it a chance to smooth out and not be so sticky for when I start to press it out, because if the acrylic is too sticky, when you first start to press it out, it's going to get stuck in your brush. I'm going to brush that down, get a wet brush, and just kind of go over the whole thing. Make sure it's all smoothed out. So now that's pretty good. I do think I'm going to add one more little bit of acrylic just to this area, especially on the side. Make sure that, you know, it's going to be strong, because we want our acrylic to be nice and strong. Nobody wants to bust a nail. There, that should be good. Look at it from the side again. Marvelous, darling. Okay, so we're gonna set this one to the side because that needs to set up. And then we're going to take a peek at our questions again. What do I do with all the nail designs that are for client nail designs I know are not all for clients? What do I do with the ones that I keep? Most of them are just ones that I keep, that I do for videos. They're almost all ones that are in boxes. And I always intend to put them in display boxes and have them put up around me in my salon space, and I have never gotten to it. So they're not doing anything too fancy. And the next question, how do I explain that to my clients that detailed art takes a lot of time? That I don't have to do very often. Most of my clients have been with me for a long time, at least the ones that have been, you know, that I'm taking now, because with the whole pandemic thing, I'm not open, my books aren't open, and so they know me. But before, whenever I would do stuff in a salon and I'd have a client, the first time I would do their nails, unless they had a photo that was really detailed, I would do something that was quick on them. So I had a couple things in the back of my head that I would do over and over and over and over again. There was a certain lace pattern that as soon as somebody said that they wanted nail art but they didn't know what it was, I'd say, do you like lace? And then, you know, most people say yes. So that was the first thing that I would do, and I had it down like the back of my hand, and it worked for weddings, it worked for bridesmaids, it worked for a teenage girl who just, you know, was getting her nails done for her birthday, worked for everybody. And I did that. You know what, I didn't wipe this nail off, and I told you guys that you have to wipe it off before I put the color on. That's classic. But anyways, it was just one of those things. And so the first time I ever did art on almost everybody, it was something fast. And then the more they got to know me, the more they got to accept my speed on things. And so it wasn't that big a deal that some of the stuff I did took a little longer, and they'd bring me photos and they knew what to expect. But that first time, I was speedy with it. And the more you do art, the faster it is. And typically, clients are very surprised by how fast I can whip out some nail art. Okay, so then I think, somebody said they think they move their acrylic around too much or move it when it should let it set. That is definitely possible. Acrylic is a hurry up and wait. You know, you rush to get, you know, the one bead ready, and then you do the next one, and you just have to let it sit there, and then you have to go back to it. And you have to wait for it to hit that sweet spot when you can move it around where it's not going to get in your brush, and it'll do exactly what you tell it to do. And that sweet spot comes and goes in the matter of 30 seconds. So you have to really learn the product to know exactly how to deal with it. Okay, so now we're going to be filing this nail. This is our French tip that needs to be all cleaned up. The bit I'm using, this one is from designed by Tony Lee. If you're going to get any products from him, I would highly recommend his bits. I have this one, and I have this little cuticle cleaner bit, and these are phenomenal. One thing about them that's so great is that they are cut so that you can use them either in forward or reverse. And unless a bit is said or, you know, stated that it could be used in reverse, even if you do use them, or it seems like they work in reverse, they'll cause heat spikes. So those ones don't do that, so that's great. And I apologize that I'm going to be turning on my e-file and it's going to make a buzzing sound. Not too bad. This is a Coupa Mani Pro Passport. And I'm turning it on to right about the center place on the speed. And I'm going to hold my tip because it'll fly off of here otherwise. We're gonna first clean up where that acrylic went over the top. Okay, so as you can see, it didn't take long, and do you see how sharp that smile line is? Obviously, if you're doing this with a hand file, it'll take a little bit more effort, but if you're doing it with an e-file, it's quick and easy to clean that up. So now that we have it that far, the smile line is looking really pretty nice. Then there's some unevenness just on the nail that needs to be cleaned up, so I'm going to go through and do that too. Make sure that it looks good from all angles. That's the one thing with filing, especially if you're working on a client. It's easy to be filing and just looking at the nail from, the straight on perspective, but really you need to look at the nails from multiple perspectives. So one thing I do is, which I know is not very ergonomic for me, but instead of moving the client's hand around, because sometimes you have clients that are stiff and can't physically move that way or are just hesitant to let you move them all over the place, is I'll tip my head to the side and I'll look at nails from the side, and I'll tip my head to the other side and I'll look at them that way from all angles. Let me just go over this. And then you also want to look at the nail, especially if it's a sculpted nail and you used a form to sculpt out the nails, is look at it from the underside to make sure that there's no unevenness that way. Look at it from the left, look at it from the right, look at the hand, the client's hand. Have you ever seen people flip the hand around and look at it like kind of upside down? That's another great way, especially if you're new and you're not sure if the nails are well shaped, is to just look at them from every single angle you can. Okay, so we're filing this. It looks pretty good. Smile line is looking nice. One thing I like to do with my nails is I like to take the tip of my e-file and I like to carve out the underside of the nail like that, just to get some of that thickness out from underneath. And then after I have it so that it's filed to about this stage, then I'm going to go through with a hand file. My absolute favorite files, which are really worn out, are the OPI edge files because I can no longer get them at Cosmoprof. And so that's where that is. And to really perfectly file a nail, I always think you have to finish them with a hand file, because the e-file, while very effective at removing product fast, does not give that perfect, flawless finish to a nail. So this is my favorite thing. Just to go over them quick. It doesn't take a lot because your e-file did the bulk of it. You're just smoothing the lines that the e-file left behind. And then obviously you have to file the free edge, file the side walls. There we go. And then, if you want to, you can either buff this with a buffer block, or you can take, and I'm going to wipe this with a tiny bit of acetone. So I've got my acetone in my, upside down, my little squirter bottle. I'm going to get just a little bit of it on a nail wipe. So it's like this, and then wipe it down. And then if we wanted to, we could finish this with some gel sealer and we could call it done. So this is, like I said, that you don't want to, I can't talk anymore. Too late for me. This is when I said that sculpting a reverse French, I think, is the basis of doing anything with acrylic. There's a lot of little technical stuff in sculpting reverse French that just kind of goes over into the whole, your whole work with nail art. You have different textures of acrylic that you need to master with reverse French. You have to have, a thicker consistency texture for your nail bed and very thin texture for the tip. You need to be able to get this nice even thing from side to side. There's filing techniques involved with sculpting a reverse French. There's just all of these different layers to it that once you can master sculpting this, you really can do absolutely anything because you have bead control, you have texture control, you have your ratio down flat by the time you can sculpt one of these without, blinking an eye. And so if you're going to practice anything on repeat, sculpt these guys. And it's not fun for some people if you don't like them. Like French is kind of outdated in a lot of people's eyes. And so if you're not somebody that loves to, do French because that's not your style, then I don't know, get over it, I guess, because it'll benefit you in the long run if you can, get this down. And plus, once you do kind of, do a few hundred sets of these sculpted Frenches, you really grow a respect for them. And when you see one and it's looking beautiful, then you'll understand that there's a certain love that you can get from a reverse French, especially one that looks nice. And so there's that. I'm not going to bother filing my little ombre here because you don't need to listen to my file anymore, but we can throw some top coat on these and make them all nice and shiny. I'll get that out. And then while they're curing, I'll go over my comments again and make sure there's no urgent pressing questions. The top coat I'm using is Ugly Ducklings No Wipe Top Coat. I got it when I was doing NTNA, and I've truthfully just been trying to work through some of those odds and ends products because I want to get them out of my cabinet. So we're going to use this up. It's really close to empty too. I'll bring that down, go over it. Looks so shiny and sharp. The other great thing with learning how to sculpt Frenches instead of painting them on is that they look so much more natural and so much more elegant instead of a gel polish French, because a gel polish French always has a lip on it so that you can see there's like this little tiny bump between the nail bed and the tip, whereas a sculpted French is just smooth and sleek and so pretty. So there's the first one. And the other thing, if you guys ever think about picking up these little nail stands, if you have a metal bottom lamp, then they'll stand up in there, and it is so nice. So I'm going to stick this one in my lamp. And then we're going to grab this one, throw some top coat on there. Even though it's not filed, that's all right. This was a little bonus. It wasn't part of my original game plan, but it just seemed so tempting to sculpt something else with you guys. Like so. Very nice. I can put that in there into my little lamp. And now we're going to switch over and I'm going to go back to where you guys can see my lovely face. I'm going to take my gloves off. Call it a night. All right. So I'm going to go and just look at some of these. So it says, since I watched Kirsty, I'll understand, since you feel like the UK nails have a different apex or deeper C curve. I feel like the UK nails look different than generic USA nails. Absolutely. There is, you can go, there's different little tiny nuances between UK and American or Australian or definitely Russia. Russian nails are very unique compared to the rest of the world. And Katie Barnes was teaching a class on competition pink and whites, and she did a UK version, and then I don't remember who the other artist was, but was doing a US version, and they had a two-part class on, each one was teaching it, but it showed UK versus US. So there's definitely differences there, and huge differences. And then another one here, odorless monomer, what's the ratio with that? Depends on the brand. It shouldn't make a huge difference if going, say, between C and D has an odorless and an, yeah, the Retention Plus, they have an odor free and they have their regular one. I don't think working with them there's a huge bunch of difference as far as the ratio goes. Speed of curing, definitely a big difference, but just the ratio for picking up your bead should be similar, but it really depends on brand more so than whether or not they're odorless. Okay, so now why acetone? So the reason I just wiped it with acetone is because acetone will dissolve the acrylic, not fast enough where what I just did would damage the structure of the nail long term. But what it did is the teeny tiny little scratchy marks that were left over by my file, as soon as you wipe it down with acetone, it melts them and smooths out the surface of the nail. So that's really good to do before you're going to do any painting. So if you're going to, sculpt a set and then do some artwork on top of it, especially if it's a gel product like gel paint or gel polish, either wipe it with acetone or put on a layer of gel-based coat first, and then your gel will go on so much smoother. So that's why the acetone. And then glitter and other, glitter and other colors can definitely add zing to a French. I started learning acrylic. I always painted a color tip on my nails or French. Yep. Can I do a natural nail care video? Absolutely. I may need to hunt down a model. My nails recently, for the past 9 months, I've had acrylic on them. I found I'm just too hard on my nails to keep them natural. I really liked it when my nails were natural, but they're so weak and they break constantly, and I'm tough on them. I mean, doing this stuff all the time is just hard on your nails. And let's see, yep, you can paint on a tip and then cap it with clear and it looks like a pink and white for sure. Can I give us a little hint of next week's class? So it's going to be next month. It'll be next, I'm trying to think. It's a little earlier next month. I can give you guys the exact date. Let me grab my calendar here. So for the February class, it'll be February 17th. So if you're on my email list, you'll get an email telling you all about it on the 10th. To be perfectly honest, I can't tell you what it's going to be or give you a sneak peek because I don't know what the topic is going to be yet. I'll probably decide on February 9th, the day before I send the email, what exactly the class topic will be, because I'm going back and forth between about 5 different things and I want to try to decide what I want to cover next. So if you want to get that sneak peek, just, send me an email, hotpinkzebrapolish@hotmail.com, and get on that email list if you aren't already. So I am so glad that we all have our little nails done. If you guys learned anything, that makes me so happy, and it made this hour and 18 minutes worthwhile. Oh, it's only been an hour and 18 minutes. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like we've accomplished so much. It must have been longer, but yeah. I hope that you guys really got some benefit from this. Tell your friends, have more people sign up, get a bigger group going so we can have some more fun. And like I said in the beginning of this, if you are interested in doing a one-on-one class with me, we can do it with Skype or Zoom or something of that nature so that we can actually see I can see your work and you can see my work a little clearer. We can have a conversation and get some stuff accomplished. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. Send me an email. Poke me on Facebook. That's not a thing anymore, but it felt like the right thing to say. This is what happens when I get tired. I get really goofy. But yeah, I'm so excited. I love doing these classes. I had fun. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did, and I guess I will see you all next time. Bye.